Hey guys, it's Nikki. Today I'm doing a book review on 28 Summers by Elin Hilderbrand, and I'm doing this because I just finished this yesterday. It took me 2 days to read, and I couldn't put it down. I didn't want to leave this world of characters. I didn't want to leave the setting. It was so emotional for me. Like, I just felt like I knew these characters, like they were family or they were friends. It was just so much fun to go through this book and relate in the way that I did. I wanted to do a quick review just to talk about the characters, the storyline, what I liked, what I didn't like, what books I'm going to read now that I've finished this, because I have a major book hangover now and I can't get this book out of my head. So I'm going to try to jump into some other Elin Hilderbrand books to see if maybe I can get that same feeling that this book gave me. So let's start out with the characters. So we have Jake McCloud and Mallory Blessing. Jake McCloud is Mallory's brother's friend from college. They had met kind of by phone when Mallory would call her brother while he was in college, and they would have these cute, flirtatious phone conversations before they ever actually met each other. And so when Mallory inherits this beachside cottage in Nantucket from an aunt that passed away, she goes to live there full time, like year round. And for Labor Day weekend, her brother is coming for this bachelor party for his first marriage. And that's going to be relevant throughout the story. But her brother and two of his friends are coming, and they're just going to spend the weekend. Her brother's friend, Fraser, or Frey, is also coming, and he used to date Mallory's best friend, Leland. Leland is also planning to come that weekend, and so it's going to be like this big deal. But Jake McCloud is also coming, and he's kind of called dibs on Mallory because they've had this flirtation, and he kind of has it in his mind that he wants to get to know her and see if they like each other. So of course there's chemistry. The chemistry is like off the charts. Like, you just see it right away. They both just fall head over heels for each other, and at that time they're both single, free agents, and they're able to kind of start this thing, right? But Jake is actually just broken up with his longtime girlfriend. They have these ties to each other that for Jake, because of who he is and kind of his moral, ethical compass, is hard for him to eventually let go of. And so they have this amazing time together. Cooper ends up leaving, Frey ends up leaving, Leland ends up leaving. I won't go into details about that because those are kind of like spoilerish, but they end up there together and spend the rest of the weekend just alone together and get to know each other and kind of form the basis of this tradition that they both come back to every year for the next 27 years. And the characters are just so rich and they're so in depth, and you get so much history going through the years. You get so much history and you get so much of their lives. You get so many kind of side characters. You have their parents, Mallory and Cooper's parents, who they call Senior and Kitty, and you have Cooper, of course, and his 5 marriages, and you have Fraser, who ends up being significant later on in the story as well. You have Leland, who's this super selfish best friend of Mallory. You have Ursula de Guernsey, who is the off and on again girlfriend slash wife of Jake McCloud. You have all these other characters on Nantucket that Mallory becomes friends with. So Apple and her husband. You have Dr. somebody, I can't remember the name of the principal who hires her as a teacher. You have the men that she ends up dating here and there on Nantucket. So you have JD, the police officer. You have Bear Burkhart, who ends up having a bigger role in this overall story. Who, by the way, I could not like Bear Burkhart. I don't know about anybody else who read the story, but for some reason I liked him, even though he was a big fat jerk and a half, and who knows the depths of his behind the scenes story that seemed like it went much deeper than the very superficial stuff that we got, which was, by the way, really interesting as it was. But I really liked Bear. I don't know why. And there were just so many characters that we got to know. We got to know know Leland's girlfriend, Fifi, who is this famous author. And there's just so many characters that you just really get to know and you really get to enjoy and feel like they just all make this story rich and just so much detail. Then there's the setting. I felt like I was in Nantucket for 2 days. Like, it was just amazing. Like, I could see the beach, I could see the cottage, I could see the restaurants they ate at, I could see the food, I could see the flowers, and just, I loved it. I loved it. It was so immersive. I felt like I was there. It probably helped that I was reading a lot outside on my hammock, and it's summer and the sun is shining and the hot tub is bubbling and like I can hear the water, but I just felt like I was there. So the setting was done really, really well, and I really feel like Nantucket itself was a character in this story. So then let's talk about the actual story itself. We start off at the very beginning of this book at the end. So this is where it gets emotional for me, and I've tried to film this video 3 times now. This is the 3rd time, so hopefully it's the charm. This story has just been so emotional for me on so many levels. It's hard to talk about the beginning because the beginning is where the book ends. So it starts off in the first little kind of almost a prologue where we find out that Mallory is dying and she's on her deathbed, and her son calls this number she asked him to call and finds out it's the Jake McLeod, and he's like, there must be some mistake. Like, how does my mom know this person? This guy is like big, he's like famous. His wife is about to be the first female president of the United States. And so he calls and Jake McLeod answers, and he's like, there must be some mistake. I'm calling about my mom, Mallory Blessing, and she's dying. And Jake tells him, tell her to hang on, I'm coming. So after that, we go back to the beginning, and the beginning is the story where they meet on Nantucket and they start their tradition. And then the story itself, they agree that they are going to meet each other on the same weekend every year, no matter what. They watch Same Time Next Year, which is a classic film. That's like part of their routine, their tradition from year to year that they meet. And no matter what, they commit to this, and they end up going every single year for 27 years after that. The things I really enjoyed about this book were, number one, the beginning of each chapter, each chapter was like the next year of summer. So summer of 1994, summer of 1995. They met in 1993. The beginning of each chapter, it says things we're talking about in 1993 or 1994 or what year it was. And it lists off like a whole paragraph of things that we were talking about or that was going on in the world during that time that was like really big. And those things were like really reminiscent, and it really put me into the story. I felt like I was able to remember that year and what I was doing and how it felt. And so that really kind of pulled me in even deeper than I already was. And it just made it seem more real to me. And there was even 2001, it talks about 9/11, and it talks about how that affected them that year, and how that affected their meeting that year and the way that their lives trajectories went. And just, it wasn't that we got a play-by-play of year to year to year. It was that we got things going on in that year that had kind of an effect on them meeting that year. And it was a lot of like, oh my God, that's gonna get in the way. Like, what are they gonna do? And so we get to see, and you get all the suspense, and it's so roller coaster, and then you get to a point where I got to the point where I started doing the math. Like, wait a minute, if the son is 19 when she dies, then that means he must have been born in this year. And so who is she with that year? Like, who is she gonna get with that year? Is it gonna be his baby? Is it gonna be somebody else's baby? Like, what's gonna be, like, what, And so I just got so invested in this story, and I didn't want it to end. The way it ended was just devastating. So here's where kind of the spoilery stuff starts. So if you haven't read the book and you don't want to be spoiled by anything, this is the part where you need to probably turn it off, because now I'm going to ask questions I have about the book that it left me hanging, like it tied up all the loose ends, but there's just so many questions I have based on the story and how it ended that I think are discussion points that would make this a really good book club read to talk about with your friends. So if you haven't read the book, turn it off now or fast forward to the end. I'm going to talk about like what questions is brought up for me. So question number 1, did Mallory waste her life? Like, she never met anybody that measured up. And I just wonder, if they had let this go, could she have found happiness with somebody else? Knowing that she dies at the end at age 51, could she have met someone and found happiness and found that person that stood by her in life and in death? Which raises the other question, why didn't she ever just ask him to be with her? Like, why didn't she just say, like, hey, why don't we be together? Why can't we do this all the time? Why is it only just once a year? Let's do this. Let's figure it out. Because I 100% believe if she would have ever said that, he would have dropped everything and made it happen. I believe that with all my heart, 100%. So I don't know why she never did, because he was clearly somebody that was so important to him. And then, then there's the question of, his reasoning for staying with Ursula and, his twin sister who died earlier in life when she was 13 years old, when he was 13 years old, and how Ursula had been friends with the sister. And it was like he predicated his entire relationship with Ursula based on who she was as a little girl, that she quit being very early on. Ursula was just so very selfish, and everything was about her. Everything revolved around her. She never saw him. She never saw him even when he was right in front of her. Did he throw his life away? What did he miss out on? And then there were things that were kind of parallel. So like, he had this really selfish wife, but then Mallory had this really selfish best friend, Leland, as well. And that was a relationship that Mallory also, they grew up best friends. Their childhood together was a certain way that wasn't the way it was when they got older, and she was able to let that relationship go. But he wasn't able to do that. And, he had a little more invested in it than Mallory had with Leland, obviously. So, I can understand that. But it was just a parallel that I thought was important to the story. Another parallel that I thought was important to the story was when Jake went to visit Ursula in Las Vegas. He gets there and his name isn't on the room, and so he can't go up to the room, but he can't get a hold of her either. She doesn't bother to answer, and then she finally comes out after like hours of him just sitting in the lobby reading a book and says, oh yeah, we went to get drinks. That's our Friday night ritual. I figured you'd be in the room. And he's like, well, you didn't put my name on the room. How could I be in the room? And she just made it like this blasé, like she didn't care that she had totally screwed him over. It didn't matter to her whatsoever. And so he left. He just got back on a plane and flew back and upgraded his ticket to first class at her expense. And good for him for doing that, But then we get to the last year that they're meeting each other, and Ursula had came like 2 weeks earlier and had asked Mallory to not see him this year, or if they won for the next 4 years or 8 years, depending on how many terms she was in office. Because when you're president, everything comes out, and this was something that they couldn't come out about her family. And Mallory made that promise, and, as much as she hated it, she wasn't going to go back on it. But when Jake gets there, and he's standing at her door, and he's knocking, and he's calling out her name, and she's hiding in the dunes, he can almost hear her phone vibrating when he's calling her, and he just asked her, like, I just want to see you just one time, and I'll leave. So it's like they both did that to him. And he's sitting there thinking about that as he's leaving on a plane back when he thought he was gonna stay for 3 days. Like, how crappy for him to be put through that. And then that was the last time he ever got to see her before she was dying. Just those parallels that I feel like were important to this story. And so that is all. yeah, I'm sure I have like a million other things to talk about, but I don't want the video to go too long. I just highly recommend to read this book. As for other books that I would like to get into, that will hopefully kind of give me that same feeling from the same author. So I have The Identicals. This is a story about two identical twins who are very different. They look exactly alike, but neither of them have the same styles. They have different attitudes on life. One of them is like very fashionista. The other one wouldn't wear anything fashionable to save her life. They live on two separate islands, but very close together. Their lives never cross. They both end up kind of in trouble in their own lives, so they end up swapping lives to kind of like fix each other's messes. And of course, things end up happening that kind of make them see like you can't escape your own problems no matter how you go about vacating your own life or whatever. But of course, I'm sure that it'll help them find a way to come back into each other's lives as well. So that is one of the books I am looking forward to reading. We'll see how this one goes. The other one is actually like a 2-book series, which is actually 3. I think the next book is coming out later this year. But we have Winter in Paradise and What Happens in Paradise. These are kind of a continuation of one story where a character named Irene has been married to this man for a very long time. He's been this doting, loving husband. They have 2 grown sons together. On New Year's Day, she gets a call that he's been killed in a helicopter accident on St. John's Island in the Virgin Islands. And come to find out, he has this whole other life, owns this villa on this island and has this other lover there. And so her and her sons end up going to the island to kind of figure out what's going on. So I started reading Winter in Paradise yesterday, and so far it's pretty good. Maybe not quite as good as 28 Summers, but it's definitely got the kind of like back and forth characters going on. So I'm looking forward to getting into that and seeing how The Identicals go as well. So anyway, I hope you guys read 28 Summers and please let me know what y'all think. If y'all want to have like maybe a group discussion about this, let me know and I'll set something up as well. But for now, I hope you guys are having a good summer and a good week, and I hope you guys enjoy the weekend coming up, and talk to you guys in the next video. Bye.